Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of The Art of Business English. This week we're going to continue with our mini-series on presentation skills. Now today I want to cover how to develop the body of your presentation and also cover some essential language to help you confidently move through the delivery of your presentation. So if you're the type of person who struggles with confidently delivering an effective presentation in English, then this episode will arm you with the tools you need to present like a champion. Now, if you haven't taken a look at episode 39 on how to open a presentation, then I encourage you obviously to do that. There's some very important information that will help you to better develop this stage of your presentation. So in today's episode, I'll be covering the following: key elements to a successful presentation body, then expressions to help you have a more fluid and controlled presentation, and then a short example of how we can bring the language together to create a clear and concise body. So let's get started by looking at the necessary elements. So you should recall that in the previous episode I discussed the importance of having a very clear core message. This is our communicative objective, and we must have a central message, as this is the central piece that all of our points in the body of our presentation must support. So you will also recall that I mentioned the 3 steps of preview, give, and review. Now, preview is the introductory stage where we explain what we're going to discuss. Give is the body of the presentation, and this is where we discuss all the points that support our core communicative objective. And finally, review, where we summarize and conclude our presentation. So today we're going to be focusing on the give stage of the presentation. However, it's critically important that you understand that this 3-step process actually continues throughout the body of the presentation. So what do I mean by that? Well, in the body of your presentation, you will have your main ideas, which are all linked to your core message. And when you introduce each of these ideas, you will follow the same principle of preview, where you introduce the main idea, okay? The give, this is where you explain the main idea and you offer supporting evidence or arguments. And review, where you summarize and bring that idea to a close before moving on to the next one. So what I'm saying is that the preview, give, and review model is used at the macro and the micro level of your presentation. Okay, so it's globally and then at the same time individually in each point. Okay, so now that we understand the 3-step process, we need to now discuss the structure of the body. Okay, so the structure can be best represented, in my opinion, in a graphical form. And if you do have, or if you do head over to the AOB website for this episode, you can log in and take a look. Okay, so there you'll have a pictorial view of a classic 3-part presentation where the core idea is at the center, the main points, and then the supporting information or evidence. Okay, so however, I will now explain it simply. Okay, so at the center of our presentation is the core message or communicative objective. All right, this must be very clear and convincing. And around this main idea, we have 3 or 4 main points which must be clearly aligned with our main idea. Now, the purpose of our main points is to help transmit to the audience the core message of our presentation. So having that core message is very important. And following on from that, the 3 or 4 main ideas, okay, also have supporting information, evidence, and examples. Okay, so supporting information is how we demonstrate the validity of each of our main ideas, okay, which in turn helps to validate our core message. So you can see that every step of this process is linked with the objective of validating our core idea. I hope that's clear. If you do have questions, then please just shoot me an email and I'll be more than happy to clarify it for you. Right, you may be wondering how to build strong supporting information. If you are, then here are some ideas for you. But one thing, make sure that these fit the form of the content of your presentation. So, problem and solution. So you provide a problem, offer a solution, cause and effect. So something and then what's the result of that thing. Facts and figures. Illustration, visual or verbal analogy is also very good. Or you can give an example. You can also compare and contrast. And quantification. Now remember, people always move away from situations of pain or discomfort. And they move towards comfort and pleasure. So if you're trying to convince your audience, you must present your core idea as the solution to whatever pain or discomfort it will solve. Okay, that's an effective way to be more convincing. So to summarize, we must have our core message clear from the beginning, as it is the foundation of our presentation. Okay, that's very important, it's clear. And we need to follow the 3-step process of preview, give, and review across our presentation. And we also need to structure our presentation around our core idea with 3 or 4 main ideas. Now, these are always aligned with our core message. And finally, these ideas are validated with supporting information or evidence. So now we're going to look at some essential language and expressions to help you structure your presentation body ideas. So language and expressions. I'm going to go through some essential language now, and I'll start by listing the function and then review the related expression. Okay, so first function is sequencing. Now, firstly, I would like to begin with. That's quite formal. Secondly, I will take a look at. Thirdly, or next, I'll move on to. Lastly, or finally, I'd like to discuss. In the beginning. To begin with. Following on from that. In the second place. In conclusion, I would like to reiterate that. In conclusion, or I'd like to conclude by stating. So those are some sequencing languages. It's language that we can use. Now remember that after each of these introductory phrases, we should pause. Okay, if you're writing it down, it has a comma. But if you're, speaking orally, then you'd pause. Okay, it helps to add impact as well. Now, adding, in addition to this point, furthermore, moreover, I might add that. Now here we would, to emphasize, we would change the tone of our voice. Another one, as well as, there is also. Okay, next function, giving examples. For example, to illustrate this point, let's consider. For instance, we could. Next function is expressing contrast. On the one hand, on the other hand. Remember, we need to use them together. On the one hand and on the other hand go together. However, on the other hand can go alone. Next one, however, we mustn't forget. So next function is generalizing. So on the whole, or in general, or generally speaking. Next one, stating preference. I'd rather something than something. I prefer something to something. Okay, so make sure you get those structures correct. I'd rather with than and I prefer to. Signaling. Okay then, that is all I want to say about. That covers my second point. A quick summary of this point. Fine, that covers the main points then. Next function is moving on. Let's move on to the next point. I would like to go on to the next issue. And that brings me to my last point. Now, if you want to focus attention, we could say, in addition to this point, I would like to draw your attention to. Let's take a closer look at. Preposition is at after look. Changing directions. I will just go back to my original point. Let me digress for a moment. Now returning back to what I was saying. As I was saying before, looking back to what I mentioned earlier. Now, if we want to refer to visuals, we could say, if we just take a look at this chart, now if you look at this graph, you will see the horizontal axis shows, while the vertical axis represents. Next one is clarifying. Is everyone okay with that? Was my last point clear? Any questions up to this point? And finally, involving the audience. As you will all be aware, Stefano, can I ask you to... Georgie, would you like to add anything to what I said about? Marco, would you mind? Okay, so there you have the building blocks for creating a presentation body. Remember what I said in last week's episode. It's essential that we plan and write out our presentation before we load up PowerPoint. We need to be able to brainstorm and put ideas down in a mind map, form, okay, as opposed to the linear workflow of PowerPoint. Now, we will use PowerPoint at the very end, but not as a central part of our presentation. I think that's important. You only use it as a supporting tool, okay, and it should have relevant graphical information as opposed to lots of text, okay, that you read from. Now, in the next part of the episode, I'm going to show you what a typical presentation body will look like. So, let's go. We're going to continue with John's presentation from last week's episode. I will introduce one main idea from his presentation and show you the language, the preview, give and review process we can follow. And if you recall from last week, John was giving a presentation to management about sales from the Christmas period. And his main ideas in the body were, firstly, the results from the data, the results from the Christmas sales campaign. Then his next point was the current market trends. And the third part of his presentation was forecasts for the coming year. So let's take a look at how this might look in the body. Okay, so right, let's begin with the sales data and analysis. So that's his introduction to that first point. I want to look at two important pieces of data: the overall financials for this period, and secondly, an analysis of individual product categories. So then he would go on and deliver that information in the body of that main point. Now, to wrap it up, to continue, so on the whole, so that's generalizing, okay, we had a very positive Christmas, so he's bringing it to an end. Well, that's all I want to say about that. Now I'll move on to my second point today, market trends. So there he's bringing the point to a close and introducing the next point. So in this part, I want to look at two main things. So again, he's introducing the next part of his presentation: current market trends, and then secondly, where we see ourselves in 6 months' time. So, and then he would go on and discuss those 2 points for this main idea, the second main idea. And of course, within this point, there would be supporting evidence, examples, and probably factual information, financial information, etc., to help demonstrate and provide the evidence for his main point, part 2. Okay, and then he would bring this to an end with, that covers my second point. Is everyone okay with that? If that is clear, I'll continue with my last point, forecasts. Well, here I'll be going into more detail, not only looking into market trends, but also looking at how we expect the company's sales to evolve in the third and fourth quarter. Firstly, and then he goes on and discusses what he is predicting in terms of forecasts for sales into the future. And then he brings it to an end. That brings me to the end of my last point. I would now like to conclude by quickly summarizing the main ideas. So, there you have a very basic outline of the body of a presentation. Obviously, there's a lot of information that you need to fill in to form the actual contents, okay? However, today, what I want to show you is how easy it is to use this signaling and sequencing language to introduce an idea, then bring it to a close, and then transition on to the next idea. And this is where this English language structure can really help you. So let's quickly review it together. You can see that each idea has a mini introduction. For example, right, let's begin with the sales data and analysis. Then a closing remark. Well, that is all I want to say about that. And finally, a transition to the next idea. Now I'll move on to my second point today, market trends. So when we use these expressions effectively, we can easily structure the body of our presentation and attain a very clear flow. Okay, so that is pretty much all we have time for then. That brings me to the end of this episode. Just to bring it all together, remember, we have the clear, we need to have a clear message for the introduction, okay? A clear message, communicative and objective at the very beginning. And we looked at the introduction last week in episode 39, which was great. And today we're just looking at how we can follow that 3-step process, the preview, give and review, just to bring each idea in and then close that idea, transition to the next one. So that's it for now. Well, I hope, as always, that you have the tools to develop the body of your presentation. Now, if you're working on a presentation at the moment, send it through to me and I'll have a quick look at it for you and give you my comments. And as always, I hope you have found this episode useful and of value. If you did enjoy it, please feel free to share it with your friends, family, and colleagues. And, be sure to give us a 5-star review over at iTunes if you've got the time. And currently I'm working on rolling out the AOBE Masters program over at the AOBE website. So if you're interested in trying out our AOBE Masters membership, then just feel free, send me an email and I'll make sure you get 3 months of free access to the site. We really want to just, get some first-hand feedback from our loyal listeners and ensure that we can help as many people as possible. So let me know if you're interested. More than happy to hook you up with 3 months of access to our transcripts, quizzes, and things like that. It's in its infancy at the moment. However, we really want to get some feedback from our members. So until next week, that's all from me. Have a great week, and I look forward to seeing you all again soon. Take care now. Bye.